Hey family, thank you for tuning in to Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. Where only the strongest roots see the light, brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. What's up, Phil?
Hey, happy Sunday, everybody. What's going on, Joe?
What's going on, brother? Another week, man. How are you?
Super busy, but it's a good busy, and I'm happy. So I'm glad to be back here. But guys, hey, guess what? We have extra content for you. If you're wondering, hey, I want more Joseph Baba Ifa. Real simple. All you have to do is click on that button right below this episode that says join. That gives you access to our exclusive membership. We got 3 separate tiers, each offering its own different perks, whether it's extra episodes, live shows exclusively just for you guys, discounts on merch, all of it. So hit that button and join.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those perks is actually getting discounts on classes. And, in Joseph Baba Ifa school, where we have 2 at the moment that we're offering, the Mojuba class, as well as the 4-week entry-level curriculum, of which I start a rotation this evening. So big packed class. So guys, if you're in the membership program or not and you're trying to expand, definitely look into the classes as well.
Nice. What are we talking about today?
Awesome, brother. So we're trucking along with our Meji series. We're getting closer to the end. After this one, we have about 4 more, and then it's all over. So that's a big boo-hoo. But today we're going to be going over Baba Otrupon Meji. Now, when you hear a name like that, you're like, well, that's, interesting and peculiar. Sounds like that we usually don't see in the English language. But it definitely is one that has a lot of influence. It's a very powerful Odu. And it really goes all the way back to its name, right? It has a alias, also known as Baba Otrupon Meji, right? And when we...
Say it again, hold on.
Otrupon. Yeah, so there's a couple ways of translating, and we're going to go over all of them during the video. But the first way we're going to go ahead and do that is by translating as Baba Otrupon Meji, which means the father who was the owner of the 2 coconuts. So what happened is when Baba Otrupon Meji descended from heaven, Olodumare gifted him something, and what he gifted him was 2 coconuts. Some people say he carried them in his hands. The more conventional way was that he had them actually hanging around his neck or in a satchel, what have you. But he was very visible with them, right? And it was a symbol of his knowledge. It was a symbol of basically him being the most intelligent and wise Odu, right? When you have that kind of credential, you definitely want to have humility, because if not, you're going to create some enemies. And he did. Initially, he really didn't know how to handle it. He kind of just walked around brandishing his coconuts, saying, hey, this is what Olodumare gave me. I'm smarter than all you guys. All of you guys have to listen to me. I know more Ifa than everybody. And people would kind of yes him to his face. But what ended up happening is he started finding himself isolated, right? And when he would try to interact with other people or fraternize with other people, they would kind of turn their backs on him or ignore him or make excuses to not be around him. So he started noticing it. And his first reaction was, well, I don't care. I'm smarter than everybody. I don't need anybody. But you begin to quickly realize in the human condition and experience, there's very little we can actually accomplish on our own that matters, at least. So he went for divination with some awos, and his own Odu, Baba Otrupon Meji, was revealed, where Ifa told him that he needed to perform 2 sacrifices. The first one was going to be with the coconuts to his ori, or to his head. And the second one was going to be the sacrifice of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, or good character, because they said that even if he sacrificed the coconuts, which was very difficult for him because it was a materialistic thing, where he said, this is the symbol of my wisdom. Everybody needs to know I know. It was very difficult for him to even sacrifice those, but even more so, the humility of, even if you know more than somebody else or you feel like you're more wise than somebody else, that doesn't mean it should come with arrogance, right? So he had to, swallow a piece of humble pie, and he did the sacrifice, right, where the 2 coconuts were actually offered to his ori. And in this Odu is why the most basic offering to ori is with 2 coconuts, right? Because the coconuts represent each hemisphere of the brain. So when we do an ibori or a 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 with abo meji omitutu, or obi omitutu as it's commonly known, what we're really trying to do is align ori in a way where our knowledge, our wisdom, and our character all kind of coalesce. So that helped him exponentially, where he wasn't only knowledgeable, he was able to utilize his knowledge in a way that was practical. Because the big difference between knowledge and wisdom is knowledge is being able to recollect information. Wisdom is having the experience to be able to know how to put that into practice. So through that is when he really became Otrupon Meji, or the owner of 2 wisdoms, or twice as much wisdom as everybody else. And when he incorporated his sacrifice of good character and he presented himself once again in his community, he changed the way he conducted himself, and because of it, people became attracted to him. They wanted to be around him, they wanted to consult him, they wanted to interact with him, because he was no longer arrogant. He had realized that through patience and humility was when wisdom was able to shine, and because of it, till this day, Baba Otrupon Meji, when aligned and when he did things correctly, was seen as one of the wisest and most knowledgeable Odus of Ifa, particularly within the Mejis, amongst the others, of course. So that's a big determining factor, or a revealing factor for us, because for the longest time, we kind of always tried to understand how the coconut came into play with so many of our sacrifices and processes, because in Africa it's used as an offering to Ori, but it's not used as a divination method. Within Otrupon Meji, the coconut was utilized for anything that had to do with wisdom or the gaining of knowledge, whether it be divination, whether it be to appease Ori and help tranquilize it and bring it peace, right? So that's the first one, kind of explaining the name. Now, there is another way of translating Baba Otrupon Meji, where it says the father of the 2 cats, right? Okay. So this Odu speaks heavily of the felines, right? And it speaks of 2 specifically, and it was 2 brothers. One was Oong, or the leopard, right? Obviously, very well-known cat, wild cat, one of the big 4 in Africa. Mm-hmm. And then you have one of the big cats in Africa, and then you have the house cat, or Ologbo, right? And they were brothers. Ironically, though, the leopard had become jealous of his brother, the house cat. And the reason being was because the leopard lived in the wild, and he was strong and had to hunt and all these other things. But the house cat, or the cat, was welcomed by society based on his character. He was cuddly, he was nice, he brought people a lot of joy. He also protected the home from rodents and infestations. I mean, this Odu speaks about this animal going all the way back to the Egyptians, Africa, whether they're viewed as the guardians of the afterlife or the protectors of the home. Originally, the cat had a very high esteem within the house, and it was from here. Apart from that, Ologbo, being the personal pet of Orunmila, knew Ifa very, very, very well. Knew Ifa and Orisha very, very well. So that knowledge brought him a lot of prestige as well. When he would come around, people would admire him, they'd pet him, they'd give him food. You know, he lived a very nice life. And he would sleep all day. So the leopard became very jealous of his brother, because due to the leopard's aggressive or arrogant character, no one really wanted to interact with him. And that's kind of a common theme in this sign, where the person has to be very careful to not end up excommunicated because of their character or their abrasiveness.
Ooh, excommunicated. That's a big one.
Yeah, right? Taking it all the way back. What is that? To when Galileo?
Yeah.
Poor guy, they ripped his eyes out.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But so there was a process or a ceremony coming up where someone had just passed away. And the cat, who was a Babalawo, right, or Awo Lobo, was contracted to come and perform the itutu, or the funeral rites, for said personality. So, of course, the cat, always being prudent, consulted Ifa before embarking on such a task. And when Ifa was revealed for him, his own Odu of Baba Otrupon Meji was revealed, where Ifa told him to not perform the funeral rites, that it was somewhat taboo for him to even be around things like that. And that if he was to go, that he should not enter into the home that the funeral was going to be taking place in. So the cat, of course being curious by nature, which this Odu speaks of as well, performed sacrifice and decided to go anyway, because he didn't want to miss the opportunity to be able to put his knowledge on display. So he arrived, and everyone was kind of staring at him and whatnot. And he actually started trying to, incorporate, his knowledge from outside, performing whatever he could from outside without going into the house. But people started saying, hey, you should go in the house. We have to do things properly, this, that, and the third. Why don't you go inside? And the cat remembered what Orunmila had told him. So what actually was happening was it was a plot against his life, where the leopard was inside the cave, or inside of the house, waiting for the cat to come in so he could attack him and kill him. But when the cat actually started singing the oro to Egun, or the songs to Egun, to be able to invoke the spirit and ultimately help it achieve elevation, the leopard became so desperate, wanting to kill his brother and eliminate the competition that was the cat, he jumped out of the cave and pounced. But at the last minute, the cat, not being in a closed area, was able to escape and go back home. So when he went home and he told Orunmila said, this is why you must listen to Ifa. This is why you must not fraternize with people who could be your enemies. Try not to make enemies. And you need to understand that not everything is for you. Not every ceremony is meant to be practiced by you, or not basically participated in by everybody. You know, everybody has different things that they're going to function in within their practice. You know, you're going to have brothers who specialize in Itutu and rites of Egun. You're going to have brothers that specialize in directing. You're going to have sisters that specialize in the Misa versus the room of Orisha, or the Erindilogun. Everybody's going to have different things to do. And the cat realized that he didn't have to be everywhere. So with this Odu, you know, you have two different personality types within it. You have the cat, which for the most part was humble, was somebody that was pretty reserved, somebody that was trying to be of service. He was trying to serve his community. But because of the treatment that he received from, you know, the people in his community or the people that were going to betray him, he became even more reclusive. That's why if you notice a cat, it'll interact with you, it'll let you pet it, it'll rub up on you, but it gets to a point where it gets overstimulated, and then all of a sudden it kind of wigs out and goes away.
Yeah,
like, man,
leave me alone.
Yeah, like what happened there, you know? As opposed to the leopard by nature is aggressive. You know, it's a hunter. It's actually one of the perfect examples of, you know, spirituality within Ifa and Orisha, but it does come with its down points when it comes to its behavior. You know, it's aggressive, it's very ferocious, right? And it's all about knowing when to apply that energy as well. But overall, the cat was seen as being a better example of Iwa, right, or the good character. So this Odu really touches on socialization. Knowing how to interact with the people around you, knowing how to hit people right, understanding that, you know, it's always better to be likable, right? And the reason being is, once again, there's another pataki that speaks of character. And in this sign, it speaks of the snails, right? There was a colony of snails, or igbing. And they would consult with a professional, or Babalawo. If I recall his name was 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃, right? Or 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃. And they would go and get consulted. And there was a very peculiar occurrence that would happen with this gentleman where Baba Otrupon Meji would come out every time they would read with him. And it was really perplexing to them, but they said, hey, Ifa is Ifa, whatever. So when they would do the recommendations that 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃 would recommend them, things would go worse for them. So mind you, they're spending money on a bowl, time, energy. Obviously, for a snail to go from one place to another, it takes a lot of effort. And they were a little perplexed because they're like, the same sign comes out. It's this guy's sign. It's our sign. We do the work. Nothing works.
Is that not normal?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's been only a handful of cases in my life where I've read somebody, right, with the same sign twice. I think it's only happened like 2 or 3 times. Like one time it was with a gentleman. He came with the same Odu twice in a reading. He read himself, and then the next time he read himself, like a couple months later, same sign came out. And then there was 2 times where I read 2 different women with a sign, and then when they received Hand of Ifa, they came with that same sign from the reading. So that's pretty, you know, that's kind of like lottery odds, you know. But usually when that happens, it's because, and this concept is born in this Odu, that Orunmila is trying to give you a message, like saying, hey, you didn't really catch everything from the last reading, you know, revisit that information so you can have a better outcome this time. So the snails decided to visit another Babalawo, specifically Orunmila in this case. And when they did divination, Baba Otrupon Meji came out again, and they looked at him and they said, yo, we read with this guy, the same sign comes out all the time, we do all the work and everything gets worse. And Ifa revealed that it was because 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃 was giving them the wrong advice. He was telling them to do the wrong things, to maintain them in a compromised state or a desperate state, to be giving them or giving him their money, and for them never to see any progress. You know, this is the Odu why the snail can spend all day trying to, you know, progress an inch and he won't even make it a centimeter. So when they did that, they immediately became angry and they wanted to attack or, slander 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃's reputation. But Orunmila advised against this because they said that if they did this, it was only going to make that person more notable. And the snails didn't listen initially. They went to 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃, they insulted him, they publicly accused him, they provided evidence, all these different things. But ironically, Orunmila was correct, because the more they did this or indulged in this behavior with this gentleman, the more famous and notable he became, where he got more clients and, he just became very, very, sought after, even with, this case. So the snails decided, they got to a point where they really didn't have the energy to indulge in this anymore. They were going to try what Orunmila said, and they were just going to completely ignore him. So after a while, 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃 realized that the snails wouldn't come for consultation, and they weren't really, hating on him. They weren't, talking about him. He wasn't a point of conversation. Now, this actually drove him mad, because he always needed to be the center of attention. So he actually went and started, harassing the snails. And the snails kind of looked at him, and, immediately they wanted to get emotional, but they're like, we're done with you. We really have nothing to say to you. I mean, if it's not going to be a physical confrontation, I mean, you can say whatever you want, because we're really done. And the snails kind of retreated and just kind of left him there alone. And, it got to the point where the guy basically started arguing with himself, to the point where he became mentally unstable. And from that day forward, 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃, when people realized that what the snails were saying was true, everyone abandoned him. And he basically just lived his instability for the rest of his days. So if we interpret Ifa in this Odu says that results are everything. When it comes to your spiritual professional, Babalawo, etc., the reason we practice Ifa, apart from it being beautiful and all these different things, is because it works. Ifa is effective. Ifa is a religion where it really gets results and makes things happen. So this Odu says if you're not getting results, we have to analyze why not. Are we as the client doing everything we can with our good character and following due process based on the recommendations from our professional? Is our professional performing things correctly or recommending things ethically via the oracle? All of these things have to be taken into account. But if Ifa is not working, it's not Ifa. It's a human being not performing or doing something that they should be. Now, there's another concept here that I think is really relatable, especially nowadays, is the conflict, right, that occurs within our spiritual community. Now, this could apply to social situations in general. Ifa says the best thing to do is ignore people, right? When they want to make claims or, accusations, or, maybe they're trying to get viewers or clout or whatever it is, it gets to a point where if we're not going to engage in combat, or if we're not going to take things to a further extreme, it's better to just leave things alone. And, everybody has to know their own tolerance level there. But the snails got to the point where they're like, we really don't have anything else to say to this person. Obviously, what they're saying isn't true. They don't believe it themselves. You can tell by their behavior. And we're just going to turn the other way, because ultimately it could interrupt money, progress, all the blessings that come from being focused. And usually, when you ignore people, and usually you don't give them any motivation or gas towards their goals, they usually don't have enough going on their own to be able to sustain it. People who base their practice off of conflict and controversy and things like that. Now, mind you, it can have very quick results as far as initially, but as far as sustaining it over a career or a longevitous period of time, they can't, because at the end of the day, what really drives things here is content. So Ifa says, for all those who are in a situation where, it's like a back and forth feud type thing, the easiest way to allow nature to reveal who people really are from a negative standpoint is to leave them to their own devices and ignore them and keep doing you. Because when the snails ignored 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃, he completely lost his mind. The narcissism that he suffered from wouldn't allow him to be at peace, because he felt like he had something to prove, and the snails knew that they were in the right, so they didn't need to. So eventually he just became somebody that would kind of, wander around the village and people would just ignore him. He kind of lost it. So it's a really wild story when you think about imagery, like somebody yelling at snails and the snails not saying anything. this is actually the Odu why snails are non-conflictive, you know, other than the ones that can cause some encephalitis. And, you know, be careful with the giant black snail as well. But this is actually the Odu why there are snails that are aggressive and you have those that are beyond docile, you know. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there was actually a really big controversy that occurred, I want to say, around the time I did Ifa, around 10 years ago. And it might still be occurring or died down. I'm not sure. I'm not really hip. But they were actually bringing over snails from Africa to perform different spiritual practices. And, you know, being that the immune system that we have in the West doesn't really resemble that of our brothers back home in Africa, because obviously the wildlife is different, nature manifests differently. They were actually utilizing the black snails from over there, and a couple people died from it. You know, they actually caught encephalitis and things like that, which is basically a swelling of the brain.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was a big issue. And I remember there was a story that occurred where one of the brothers that was importing the snails and actually got into some heat over it, you know, because it was ultimately a malpractice, spiritually, medically, etc. And he actually called back to Africa and he said, hey, those snails, they hurt a couple people. And, you know, the brothers back home were like, hey, we utilize the snails because we're eating them from the moment we're born. We're playing with them. You know, we have, you know, a certain level of defense against them. But for people such as yourselves, we recommend using regular snails because that's within your ambiance. So that was a big folly that occurred. So please be careful and make sure you're not interacting with that one, especially if you've never interacted with it before, because it can have some very detrimental health effects. So pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this sign, the snails became aggressive. So it's what was SpongeBob's
Gary.
My dog Gary. This is the Odu of Gary. Yeah, Gary popped off here. There was a couple episodes where he lost it, so he was probably 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗲 Meji.
Hey, I'm sure they got their, you know, they read that. And
I'm sure, right? Yeah, they had a producer on there. It was a Babalawo. But yeah, SpongeBob was my joint. But anywho, Baba Otrupon Meji. This Odu speaks very heavily of the Orisha Shango. So within the shell of Erindi Logun, or that divination system, is known as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, right? Or big 2 or 12, right? Or 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗁, which means, you know, when there's war, the soldier does not sleep. So it directly correlates to this Odu, where most people within the Erindi Logun oracle believe that the number 12 belongs solely to Shango, right? Because just the elements of fire and the connotations between Otrupon Meji and its correlation to 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲. But in this Odu, it speaks heavily of Shango, right? And Shango here had a friend, and his friend was the goat. And he thought everything was great. You know, him and the goat were together all the time. He would never eat the goat. You know, it was his friend, you know, as opposed to other animals that he would consume because of the relationship they had. And Shango started noticing that the more he hung out with the goat, the worse things were going for him.
Oh.
So he thought it was a little perplexing because, you know, that had never happened before. So he went for divination with Orunmila to see why he was feeling the way he was feeling, and Baba Otrupon Meji was revealed, where Ifa said that he needed to perform sacrifice with a goat. And he said, I'm not going to do that because the goat is my best friend. And Orunmila said, well, Ifa is saying that to resolve your issues, you have to kill the goat. And Shango just couldn't do it or wouldn't believe it. So things started getting progressively worse. And Eshu, kind of seeing what was going on, told Shango one day to come with him and see what, you know, he wanted to reveal to him. So from the bushes, Shango saw the goat fraternizing with his enemies. And his enemy was the ram, right? Where the goat would gossip about Shango to the ram and his family, the other animals that Shango would consume, like the turtle, the rooster. And Shango was completely heartbroken. He couldn't even believe it. He said, you know, I've given nothing but loyalty to this brother, and he's completely betrayed me. Why would he do this? And 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 said it's jealousy. You know, most of the time betrayal is fueled by jealousy and envy. And Shango said, well, I think it's time to follow Orunmila's recommendations, but I'm going to need some help. And Eshu was like, hey, I'll help you kidnap him, no problem. But you got to share it with me. And he was like, man, you can have as much as you want. Let's roll. So they basically, you know, it was pretty gangster. They kidnapped the goat. They tied him up. and they were going to sacrifice it to Oshun and Shango's icon and consume him. And at the last moment, the goat started trying to plead with Shango emotionally to let him free, that they were friends and all these different things. And Shango basically revealed what the goat did not know that Shango knew, was that, hey, you betrayed me with the ram. You started talking crazy about me. You were setting up a plot to have me killed. I know everything that you did, so I know what I'm doing is right. And Ifa already told me I have to off you. So the goat kept trying to plead, and then, they executed him. And Shango and Oshun ate the goat together. And in this Odu is why Shango eats goat as well. So the goat sacrifice to Shango is to overcome enemies, wars, the revelation of hidden enemies, which are so-called friends. This Odu says that the person has to be very careful who they consider or call friend, because it's an Odu of utmost betrayal, where the person is constantly being turned on, right? So unfortunately, there's going to get to a point where their circle is going to become as small as a dot, because it's just going to be constant envy, betrayal, etc., where the person really becomes disenchanted with the idea of society. So there has to be a balancing act there. We have to understand that if we look at the story, Shango's friends were his wife, in this case his brother, and because of it he was able to defend himself. But if he wasn't careful, the goat would have actually killed him. So
jeez,
it's pretty sad. Baba Otrupon Meji. This Odu speaks a lot about the divination that was done for honey, right? And it speaks heavily of this ingredient as being one that, has to do with fertility, enjoyment of life. Apart from that, cleansing and protection that it provides. But in this Odu, it says that no one is happier than a child eating honey.
Okay.
So in this Odu, Oshun had a son, and he was revealed to be Otrupon Meji upon his initiation. Now, Oshun had separated from the boy's father. She was a single mother. And because of it, she wanted to spoil the boy, because she felt that, it was a way to compensate for the pain of her divorce and, the father not being in the child's life. It was a sad story. So what ended up happening is she would feed him honey, because that's what she had. And she would feed him honey, and the baby would laugh and be happy, and, But the problem is as he started consuming more and more and more honey, he started getting larger. This is actually the Odu where obesity and being overweight actually manifested for the first time. And it got to the point where the boy wasn't able to move. He was having trouble breathing, circulation, all these different things. So she went running back to Oromila. Otrupon Meji was revealed again, where Ifa told Oshun that she needed to stop spoiling the boy. She needed to stop giving him so much honey, and stop overindulging him. But at that point, Oshun had to recognize the pathology and motivation that was causing her to do this, where she had to overcome the pain of her divorce, which some people say the father of her children was Shango in this Odu.
Of course.
So, yeah, we're not going there.
Not surprised, but
we're
okay.
not going there today. We're staying positive, not today. And shout out to all the Changos, man. We love y'all, but, Papa is what he is. And, she at that point, had to stop giving him so much. And with that, came the tantrums, came the pain, but the boy was able to regulate his weight and then have a quality of life, right? So this Odu is one of the Odus why, because there's also a verse for honey in Okanafung, if I recall, within Isese. But in this Odu is why when we perform sacrifice to the Orishas, in a very commonplace way, or almost always, honey is offered. A lot of people have asked me, Baba, why do we always offer certain ingredients to the Orishas? And in this Odu, honey was identified as one of the staple ingredients for all Orishas. There's not one Orisha that has a taboo of honey, right? And it also speaks of the importance of Oshun providing happiness, because she is the embodiment of honey. So in this Odu, based on this information, is why we always offer honey to the Orishas, right? So that they can bring us happiness, so they can be happy in a moderate way. Even though it's not this Odu, the concept can also be seen in the Odu of Babalawo, where once the honey was placed, right after is when they placed the feathers. And it was to cover the Orishas, and, you know, that had its benefits as well. But it all started in Otrupon Meji. This Odu says that we cannot overindulge ourselves or our children as a way to compensate for pain. So this Odu speaks of the importance of addressing pain, working through it any way, shape, or form that we can productively, and understanding that everything in life is moderation, you know? There's a lot of simple and great pleasures within life, whether it's a fabulous plate of food, whether it's a cigar, whether it's a vacation, whether it's buying a nice piece of clothing. Any of these things can provide us joy and happiness, but everything has to be in moderation, and that's what this Odu says. Everything has to be controlled and somewhat, you know, formalized, so that we don't overindulge to the point where it can cause us harm, because too much of anything is not a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaks of that for sure. And in this sign, Oshun became the owner of honey, right? So, beautiful story there, if we live it correctly. So, this Odu is the Odu of the big cats, right? This is actually one of the few Odus where 𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 was manifested. And 𝗵𝗿𝗃𝗃 is the tiger. Now, mind you, the tiger is not indigenous of Africa, at least at this point in history. Maybe when all the continents were connected, it used to, you know, frequent Africa. But as of right now, the king cat in Africa is the lion. But ironically, in Otrupon Meji, it speaks of why the tiger was so superior that they actually outed him from Africa. Why the other cats basically joined forces against him to get rid of him. And if you look at a tiger, you know, I think a beast lion maxes out as between 400 to 500 pounds. I think a tiger can be anywhere from 7
to 1,200
to 12. Yeah. Like, yo, like you look at the Siberians, dog. Like, I saw a video the other day. They had tigers, right? And then they let a Siberian in there. And, bro, as soon as he was twice the size of everybody. And immediately they all went into the fetal position, or the vulnerable position. They exposed all their vitals. And that's all it took. So that's actually the Odu Otrupon Meji, when the tiger would come in and would bully everybody else. And the reason he was able to do this was because of his markings. The way he looked, the way he was able to camouflage and whatnot, it gave him an advantage. Advantage how? He was able to hunt better, therefore eat more, therefore being bigger. He was able, because of this, to develop greater skills and refine them. And it actually gave him an advantage in combat, to where he was really beasting all the other cats. So all the other cats were like, yo, we all have a common enemy here. Otrupon Meji says the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So the cheetah, the lion, the leopard, the jaguar, everybody that was there, even though jaguars are in South America now, at this point everybody was kind of together. Yeah. And they all basically turned on the tiger to get rid of him, pushing him east, you know, whether it was to India, Siberia, wherever, you know, they're found now. And he never returned to Africa because of that. So this is actually the Odu of the massacre. This is where massacres first manifested, because it's said that the tiger had such an appetite that it would eat and eat and eat. This is basically the Odu of 𝘃𝗵𝗏, right, from the Jungle Book.
Oh.
Yeah. So now, when we talk about the tiger, the advantage it had was its stripes. It was able to camouflage in a way that the others could not. And it's really unique to him, right? So where do they come from? This Odu explains how. So there was a tribe of tigers, right? Or a collective. I'm not sure what the proper term is. I know for lions it's a pride. But there was a young tiger, and he was born without stripes, like they were. And he would see all of his, you know, he saw his father, his uncles, his brothers, his cousin. All of them had stripes. So he said, I want my stripes. And they told him, hey, be patient, you know, you're an adolescent, learn, grow, your time will come. And he was really, really desperate. And he said, well, I want my stripes now. And he was so persistent to the point where, you know, everybody started taking notice, and they realized that they weren't going to be able to stop his ambitions. So in movie, like, it was, you remember the movie The Roots?
Yeah.
Where they kidnapped Kunta and they took him into the jungle? Mm-hmm. So basically that's what they did with the tiger, the baby tiger. They took him into the jungle, and when he was in the jungle in the darkness, he was assaulted, right? He got jumped in, basically. And all the tigers started scratching him, right? So they left him near dead, right, as was custom. and he started healing. But from the scratches, the stripes started manifesting. Like, it was the scars. So when he healed, when he came out of the jungle healed, everybody received him. And he went up to his father and he said, you know, why was that done to me? And he said, because to have stripes, you have to go through pain. And now you know why we were so hesitant to bring you in so young. But if you wanted them, you got them, and you survived, you know? So the stripes of the tiger were born here, where it was basically, you know, a beatdown, you know? So when we interpret this, there's a really great message here that says, when you look at somebody that's formed, when you look at somebody that's successful or accomplished, or that has something that may be desirable, we always have to think, what did that person go through or have to go through to get there? Because the baby lion would look at his father and be like, man, you look at his stripes, look at all that he has. I want all that. I could do that. But when he actually had to go through the process and the pain that it took to be able to watch his scars turn into stripes and ultimately give him that position and prestige within his community, he realized, man, I could have waited a little bit longer for that. But we can't always tell you everything before we bring you in. So when you look at the concepts behind Ifa and Orisha, you know, especially with us in the New World, oh, why are you guys so secretive? Why don't you guys show anything on camera? Well, at least at one point it was like that. We're starting to get dangerously close to sacrilege if we haven't already arrived there. Yeah. Why are you guys so, you know, resistant? And the reason being is because Otrupon Meji told us that there's certain things you cannot reveal to people before they go through initiation rites, because they might not do it. I'll be honest with you. And for me, it wasn't so much the pain, because Ifa is full of painful processes, especially within my lineage. You know, there was a lot of influences there from some of the other fraternities in Cuba, so it was very intense when I went through things. And that's why women shouldn't go through the rites of Ifa from a priesthood standpoint in any way, because they are inflictive of pain. And the 𝗿𝗶𝗍𝗶 says women should not undergo any more pain than they already do based on childbirth. That's why women don't need to go through 𝗿𝗲𝗏. But when you look at the physical aspect, that wasn't what was most detrimental. It was really more the social aspect that affected me, because, you know, when I came into Ifa, I always thought it was, you know, it was all fraternity. You know, I'd see the Babalawos, I'd be like, fraternity, handshakes, hugs, you know, laughter, all these different things. I'm like, man, this is the greatest club on earth. I got to get in there. But when you go into the jungle and you start seeing people for what they really are, you know, this Odu says, do you still want to know me the more you know me? You know? And the more you get to know...
That's interesting. Where'd you hear that line from?
That's from Otrupon Meji. And it says it that you really know whether you want to be around somebody the more you get to know them. You know, because when you go through that honeymoon stage, it's like everything's lovely. There's money, there's vacations, there's infatuation. But who are you after that? You know? And with me, it was like that too, because as you go through the socialization aspect and you begin to realize how aggressive Africa is, especially within this spirituality, if we were to completely expose that, or what people go through before they go into the room, they might not come in. And this isn't us trying to hide it. Orula left this in place because he understood human nature. So, you know, with the channel, we try to be as honest as possible. I mean, Ifa ultimately is a beautiful thing. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever encountered from a spiritual standpoint. But at the same time, it does have its aspects where you have to understand it's not all, you know, high fives and music. So I think Otrupon Meji makes a very big reference to that. So, okay, you know, but the scars and stripes of the tiger were born here. So it's one of the few legitimate verses that I've seen that actually speaks of this animal. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Baba Otrupon Meji speaks of the importance of maintaining good relationships with our elders and our initiates, right? And this sign was where, once again, it speaks of the impatience of the person trying to get initiated or wanting to, you know, grow and occupy that position of leader. So in this sign, a gentleman did Ifa, and he was revealed to Otrupon Meji. And, you know, his godfather told him, hey, you have a beautiful sign. You're going to accomplish a lot of great things. You know, you're destined for greatness. But you have to go at a pace. You know, you learn your moyuba, start learning how to throw koko, learn how to do 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁, learn how to sacrifice four-legged animals. Like, start building, learn how to direct the hand of Ifa and so forth, wherever you want to go. So initially, the person started studying very intensely. They grew very quickly. They showed great talent. They had a lot of great things going for them, and they were starting to be recognized within the community. But Otrupon Meji wanted to receive 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗂. He wanted to receive his ceremonial knife, which was symbolic of his liberty spiritually, right? And with that would also come the tools of, Ifa, all the things that he would need to be able to study independently and practice independently. And when he went to his godfather, he said, hey, I've fulfilled all these prerequisites. I have the money. I want to receive my knife. And the godfather said, not right now. And Otrupon Meji was greatly disturbed by this because he had studied and he had saved and he was ready to go, right? So he brought it up again to his godfather in passing, and his godfather said, don't ever bring it up to me again until I bring it up to you. And Otrupon Meji once again became very discouraged. So there's various versions of the story, but Ifa says in one of them that the Omofa, or Otrupon Meji, actually burglarized his godfather's home and stole the knife, right? This caused a really big issue. Otrupon Meji wasn't discreet with his robbery either. He started functioning with it. And this was a really big scene that was occurring. It was a lot of slander and salaciousness and whatnot, until there was an encounter that was set up and mediated between the godfather and the godson. Now, the godson was given the opportunity to speak first. He said, I stole the knife because I had the money, I had the knowledge, and you don't want to give me my freedom. So I took it. And his godfather looked at him and said, I wanted to give you the knife, but the reason I didn't give you the knife was because I was waiting for you to learn the concept of 𝗃𝗏, or good character, before providing it to you. Because I knew that if you received it without having humility, you were going to be destructive rather than productive. And you have proven that to everyone in our community, to the point where me and you, from this day forward, have nothing to discuss. And at that point, Otrupon Meji realized he had made a huge mistake. But there's certain mistakes we can't come back from. So from that point forward, he was always seen as a rogue. He was always seen as somebody that wasn't fully legitimate because he hadn't gone through protocol with his elders. Now, mind you, very old school way of thinking. Me personally, I would have explained it a little bit more. But, our elders really didn't have the patience for that sometimes. Good or bad, it was what it was. Now, can that be taken to a common modern standpoint all the time? Absolutely not, because we're dealing with people who don't come from these backgrounds and understand that level of obedience, that maybe Afro-Caribbean or Afro-descendant people do. So we have to explain things to a certain degree and be frank and transparent with people. So either side could have done things better, but at the end of the day, both of them did things wrong because it led to a separation and basically a deterioration of their spiritual home. But who ultimately was even more wrong was the godchild. And for everybody out there, always remember this, that anyone who argues with their godparent is always wrong, regardless of the situation. Distance is always better than disrespect. You have to know when your words are not going to have an effect. It's better to back away, leave situations as they are, and do what you're going to do anyway. In reality, what Otrupon Meji should have done, which isn't ideal neither, is he should have looked for other, avenues to be able to fulfill his desires. But ultimately, what he needed was 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗂, or good character, which his godfather didn't want to reward him without having it. So the reason I bring up pataquis such as this is because they're so applicable, unfortunately, to the social media era of Ifa and Orisha. And I think in society in general. We're living in such a phase of instant gratification where, okay, you're not going to give me that, I'm going to go here. Now, mind you, there's limits. No one should go a year without learning anything. That's too much. Now, mind you, when you look at Otrupon Meji's godfather, he didn't make him wait that long before he was going to give it to him. But at the same time, Otrupon Meji was so impatient, he wasn't going to wait a week even. So in this era, we have to understand that if you have selected somebody to guide you through this process, you have to trust their process. So, Padrino, can I get how to direct the Ifa? Well, before that, let's learn how to direct the Mano Orula. Let's learn how to do 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁. You know, everybody is so fixated on a title sometimes that we lose sight of what goes into creating a title. What goes into creating a title? And what goes into creating a title is knowledge and wisdom and experience and sacrifice, you know, to be able to be recognized by your community as a figure or position within it. So Otrupon Meji speaks of the need to, you know, find that balance between elder and initiate so that both of them feel comfortable at the pace that they're both growing simultaneously. Because once again, the elders should not stop growing just because they're birthing other people. So Otrupon Meji speaks of the importance of avoiding conflict, of creating peace. You know, it's an odu of destruction if we're not careful. You know, it's one of the odus that was actually present along with the odu Baba Ifa upon the moment of creation, right? But at the same time, this is the odu of the massacre. This is the odu of explosions, catastrophes, you know, destruction. So it's very important to find that balance because it has a lot of talent, but it can also cause a lot of turmoil as well.
Wow.
What a sign, huh?
Yeah, man. You said there's only like 4 left? I mean...
Yeah, well, after this one, we have 𝗿𝗲𝗿𝗃𝗍𝗃, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃, and Oshun. So we're going down the mountain for sure at this point. I really enjoyed studying this odu. I actually didn't expect much of it when I read about it or when I had heard about it initially because it's one that comes out so little. And apart from that, it's not one that's really spoken of. But that's why I always tell people we have to study. Because when I actually opened up the book and took my time, I usually take a month to a month and a half per odu to really, you know, pack in the information from a cerebral standpoint. You know, I fell in love instantly. I mean, it had a lot of great information in it. But it's all about recognizing. You have to know what to look for as well and then know how to apply it as well. But, you know, there's a couple, you know, historic figures that had this odu that really made it shine. You know, gentlemen such as Isidro Valdés, who was actually the son of Bonifacio Valdés, who was one of the patriarchs of my Ifa lineage, was Baba Otrupon Meji, if I recall correctly, based on sources that have revealed that info to me. He did a lot of great things in Venezuela when he left Cuba. But it's an odu that if you know how to maneuver it, it can provide great results for sure.
Yeah, this is a mental note for me, but we should make a playlist for all the Mejis.
Absolutely.
On YouTube, put all 16 in there.
Absolutely.
Episodes that we do. So this is just a mental note for me.
Absolutely.
But guess what time it is, man?
Remember time.
That's right. You got to show some love to the people who show love to you. Right? And like I said in the beginning of this episode, right under this button, right under the video, sorry, there's a button that says join our membership platform that gets you access to so many perks, whether it's extra episodes, early releases, live shows just for you, discounts on merge. I think, Joseph, you said discounts on the classes.
Absolutely.
As well. So let's show some love. So today I'm just showing the people who just joined.
All right.
Brand spanking new members here. So let's take a look. So we got Steph.
Welcome.
They are a supporter. They just joined today.
Awesome. Thank you.
We got 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 Vasquez.
All right.
They're a premium super fan. They joined 3 days ago.
Thank you.
We got Talia Rodriguez, a VIP.
Okay.
All right. They are for 4 days. Nice. Lily Divine, they're a supporter with 6 days. And rounding out, we got Ezra as a supporter at 7 days.
Guys, thank you so much for joining. If you know anybody that could benefit from the membership program or the classes, be sure to let them know about it. They're ongoing. Botanicacandlesandmore.com is up and running for all of your service and product needs. We do ship. If you can't catch us on YouTube, be sure to check us out audio on all of the big platforms, Apple, iHeartRadio, etc. A big thank you from all of us here at Botanica Candles and More, Our Roots Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, see the light.
See ya.